If you think modern Europe is dangerous, try stepping back 50,000 years. No cities, no borders, no roads, just endless forests, frozen plains, and something far more terrifying than any wolf or bear walking those lands: giant cave lions. I don't mean the lions you see in zoos or documentaries. These were Panthera spelaea, Ice Age killers that made today's African lions look small. Bigger frame, longer legs, heavier build, built for speed, power, and brutal efficiency. If you stood face to face with one, you wouldn't think lion. You'd think monster. And to early humans, that's exactly what they were. Europe at that time wasn't friendly to humans. The weather alone tried to kill you. Freezing winters, dangerous summers, food that disappeared without warning. But the worst part wasn't the cold. It was the fact that humans were not the top predator. They were somewhere in the middle of the food chain, and above them sat cave lions. Silent, massive, and perfectly built for hunting large prey, including humans. These lions weren't wandering around casually. They ruled the land. They didn't hide in caves for warmth like humans did. They used caves as dens, as feeding grounds, as places controlled by predators, not shelter for fragile people. Early humans would have to check every cave, every dark opening, every rocky overhang, knowing that one wrong move could be the last thing they ever did. And unlike other predators, cave lions weren't just scary because of their size. They were organized, social. They likely hunted in small groups, working together the same way modern lions do today, but on a larger scale, with larger targets: mammoths, giant deer, woolly rhinos, and sometimes humans who wandered too far from their group. A single cave lion could weigh between 230 and 350 kilograms. Some estimates go even higher. That's heavier than most adult male lions today. And these lions had longer legs and a leaner, more muscular frame. They weren't just powerful, they were fast. Specialists in short, explosive attacks. One mistake, one wrong sound, one branch snapping, and the grass moves. Then you're gone. Humans didn't stand a chance alone. A lone human versus a cave lion wasn't a fight. It was a delay before death. No spear, no rock, no club would change the outcome. Even if the human managed to land a blow, the lion could take it. Its bones were thick, its muscles dense. One swipe of a paw could break a rib cage. One bite could crush a skull. These weren't exaggerated kills. These were real possibilities. And the worst part? Cave lions didn't just hunt when they were starving. They were dominant predators. They defended territory. They removed threats. A human group entering a cave lion's as hunting ground wasn't just a new food source. It was competition. And nature doesn't tolerate competitors. So how did these lions find humans? They had everything working in their favor. Excellent night vision, incredible hearing, sensitive whiskers that could detect the slightest change in air movement, and the ability to stalk without a sound. Humans carrying tools, stepping on branches, breathing loudly in the cold, were basically announcing their presence to an expert ambush predator. Picture a small group of prehistoric humans walking along a tree line at dusk. They're tired, hungry, thinking about finding a place to rest. They don't see the lion. They don't smell it. They don't hear it. It's already locked onto them, crouched low, watching. It chooses the weakest. Maybe a young man, a tired woman, a child lagging slightly behind. The attack doesn't even look dramatic. A sudden burst of motion. A body disappears into the shadows. Screams. Panic. By the time the rest of the group grabs weapons and turns around, it's gone. And so is the person who was just there. That was reality. No heroic fight. No dramatic final stand. Just silence followed by fear. And this wasn't rare. Evidence of human cave lion encounters shows up in bones with bite marks in exactly the spots lions attack today. There are sites where human and lion remains are mixed together, suggesting clashes, failed hunts, maybe even ambushes on both sides. Early humans etched images of giant lions on cave walls, carved them from stone and bone, painted them into their stories. You don't immortalize something like that unless it terrifies you. These lions weren't background animals. They were powerful enough to shape human behavior. Humans in Europe had to change how they lived because of them. Campfires burned all night, not just for warmth, but for protection. Groups stayed close. Children were guarded constantly. Lookouts were probably placed on the edges of camps. Spears were kept close even while sleeping. No one wandered off alone. Silence was dangerous. Darkness was deadly. When humans migrated, they didn't just think about rivers and food. They thought about whether lions had been seen in that region. They learned the territories of these animals the same way modern people know dangerous neighborhoods. Word spread. Stories carried warnings. Don't go near that valley. Don't cross that ridge at night. Don't camp near that cave. This was survival through constant fear. And somehow, despite the power of these lions, humans didn't go extinct. In fact, something very interesting began happening. Instead of always being the hunted, humans began observing, learning, adapting. If you ever found yourself face to face with a cave lion in Ice Age Europe, the worst part wouldn't be the size. It wouldn't even be the teeth or the claws. The worst part would be the silence right before it happened. These animals didn't charge in with noise the way a bear might. They didn't howl like wolves or growl as a warning. A cave lion was built for one thing: to end the situation before you even understood what was happening. They hunted the same way modern lions do today, but on a colder, more open, more brutal landscape. They used terrain like a weapon. Tall grass, rocky ridges, snowbanks, tree lines, riverbanks, anything that could break your line of sight. They preferred low angles and short distances. They didn't waste energy chasing. They waited. They studied. And when the moment was perfect, they exploded forward in a burst so fast the human brain wouldn't even register movement properly. For humans, this meant danger came from the edges of vision, not the center. You could be looking straight ahead, thinking you were safe, while the real threat was already moving at your side. 1 second you're walking. The next, the ground is gone. The air is knocked out of you. Something heavy crashes into you. Everything becomes noise and confusion. By the time you understand what's happening, it's already over. Cave lions aimed smart. They didn't go for random bites. Like modern big cats, they targeted the neck, the spine, or the head. Cut off air, destroy balance, end resistance. A human had almost no time to react. Even if others were nearby, the attack was usually finished before they could do anything useful. And here's what made them even deadlier in Ice Age Europe: numbers. There is strong evidence cave lions didn't always hunt alone. They likely formed small groups, especially in regions where prey was large and dangerous, like mammoths or bison. That same teamwork easily transferred to human targets. One lion distracts, another comes from the side, another blocks escape. If a human group panicked and ran, it only made things easier. They separated themselves. They made noise. They created perfect conditions for a predator that could outrun any of them. Humans eventually learned this the hard way. Running wasn't always the best option. Lighting fire, making noise, standing close together, moving toward open ground. These things increased survival chances. Fear didn't disappear, but experience started to change the outcome of encounters. And over time, something even more interesting happened. Humans didn't just fear cave lions anymore. They started to study them. They noticed patterns. Lions preferred certain valleys, certain caves, certain hunting paths. They avoided open areas with lots of visibility. They didn't like large, loud groups. Fire made them hesitate. Sharp, upright objects made them cautious. Humans learned when to expect them and when a place might be safer than it looked. And as human weapons slowly improved, the balance shifted even more. Wooden spears became longer. Stone tips became sharper. People stopped hunting alone. They developed formations. Instead of panicking, they began standing their ground. They used terrain the same way the lions did. They drove them into narrow spaces, towards cliffs, into pits, into rivers where movement was limited. This was a massive change. For the first time, cave lions were no longer guaranteed to win. And that was a problem for them, because cave lions were built for dominance, not loss. They needed large territories, large prey, stable populations of animals. And all of those things were disappearing at the same time humans were getting stronger. Ice Age Europe was changing fast. The climate grew colder and drier in some places, then wetter in others. Forests shrank. Open plains expanded. Herd animals migrated or vanished. Mammoths and giant deer became less common. The animals cave lions depended on were slowly disappearing. At the same time, humans were increasing in number. More groups, more territory covered, more hunting pressure, less space for large apex predators to operate safely. For a species like the cave lion, that combination is fatal, not a dramatic end. Not one final battle, a slow squeeze, less prey, more competition, more risk when hunting, more injuries, more starvation, fewer cubs surviving. Over generations, the population dropped. Regions that once belonged to cave lions went quiet. Tracks became rare. Encounters became less frequent. Until one day, without any human realizing it, the most dominant predator in Europe was gone. The caves they once ruled became empty. The paths they once walked grew over. The silence they once controlled belonged to humans now. And the craziest part is this: humans didn't just outlive them. They remembered them. Cave paintings, carvings, stories passed down. Not as normal animals, but as powerful, almost mythical beings. Bigger than life. Stronger than anything else. Because for thousands of years, that's exactly what they were. But even the rulers of a continent can fall. By the end of the Ice Age, the world that created the cave lion was disappearing. And the cave lion wasn't built for the new one. That's the part most people don't realize. These animals didn't just lose to humans in some dramatic showdown. They lost because the entire system that supported them collapsed. And humans were one of the biggest reasons why it collapsed in the first place. Cave lions were specialists. They were built for a very specific kind of world. Wide open spaces, massive herds of large prey, long hunting ranges, and stable cold climate ecosystems full of huge animals. Mammoths, giant bison, wild horses, massive deer, woolly rhinos. That's what they were designed to hunt. Their size made sense when the world was full of enormous, slow, calorie-packed animals. But when that food started vanishing, their strength became a disadvantage instead of an advantage. As temperatures slowly began rising and the Ice Age started losing its grip, the European landscape transformed. Frozen plains turned to forests. Open tundra shrank. Swamps and dense woodlands expanded. The animals that had once dominated the land either migrated north, adapted into smaller forms, or went extinct. With fewer mammoths and giant herbivores, cave lions had to target smaller prey. But smaller prey meant more effort for less reward, and an animal that large burns through energy incredibly fast. At the same time, humans were becoming more organized, more efficient, and more widespread. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were expanding. They hunted the same large animals the cave lions depended on. They built better tools. They formed bigger hunting groups. They claimed better hunting grounds. They controlled fire and used it to shape the land. And without realizing it, they were slowly pulling the foundation out from under the cave lion's entire existence. It wasn't just about direct conflict. Yes, humans probably killed cave lions when they had the chance. A lion was a huge threat and an even bigger trophy. Killing one meant safety, status, and powerful symbolism. But the larger impact came from something more subtle. Humans removed the prey that fed the lions. When you take away the food source of an apex predator, you don't need to hunt the predator to extinction. Time does it for you. And time was running out. The final populations of cave lions became smaller and more isolated. Groups that once covered massive territories were pushed into pockets of land, trapped between expanding forests, changing climates, and growing human presence. Each generation was weaker. Each litter had fewer surviving cubs. Injuries from failed hunts went untreated. Hunger became normal. The world that had once belonged to them now belonged to something else. And that something else was a species that didn't even look impressive. Humans were smaller, slower, weak compared to a cave lion. But they had something the lion never could: flexibility. They could change diets, change tools, change strategies, change locations, change behavior. The cave lion couldn't. It could only do what it was designed to do. And when its design no longer matched the world, it lost. Eventually, the last cave lions died in small, forgotten corners of Europe. No one recorded the moment. No one knew it was happening. There wasn't one final roar that echoed through the mountains. Just silence growing slowly in places that used to be ruled by the most powerful predator on the continent. And humans stepped into that silence without realizing what had just disappeared. Thousands of years later, we would find their bones buried in dry caves and frozen ground. Massive skulls, giant teeth, muscles attached to bones thicker than anything seen in modern lions. And suddenly, the cave paintings started to make sense. The carvings, the strange lion-human figurines, the reverence, the fear. These weren't exaggerated monsters invented in stories. They were real, living, breathing proof that there was a time in Europe when humans couldn't walk freely, sleep easily, or travel alone without risking becoming prey. A time when every shadow could mean a gigantic feline watching, calculating, waiting for the moment when you separated from the group or looked the wrong way. That's why the title isn't an exaggeration. There really was a time when Europe was ruled by giant cave lions, and humans were just another animal trying not to die. And if you had lived there back then without modern weapons, without cities, without protection, you wouldn't have survived it. And that's where history went one way, but it could have gone another. Because all it would have taken for the cave lions to survive is one small difference in the world. A slightly slower climate shift, a few more generations of stable prey, a different path in human expansion. Just one change, and Europe right now would look nothing like the place we know. Picture it: forests and plains that still belong to a dominant apex predator. Not wolves, not bears. Something far more powerful, far more territorial, and far more dangerous. Giant cave lions wouldn't live hidden in tiny pockets the way today's big cats do. They would control massive stretches of land. Entire regions of Europe would be known as no-cross zones, not protected parks, not reserves. Just places humans don't go because you don't come back. Cities would be built around them, not over them. Every major settlement would exist with constant awareness of where the closest lion territories are. Borders wouldn't just be political, they'd be biological. A river might be the difference between safety and death. A forest line might be the edge of civilization. You wouldn't go hiking alone, ever. Camping without protection would be unthinkable. Night in rural areas wouldn't feel peaceful. It would feel like ancient times, a soft tension under the quiet. Because you'd know something out there is smart enough to wait and strong enough to end you in seconds. Even transportation would be different. Forest roads would be designed to stay wide and visible. Villages in remote regions would be built in clusters for safety. Rural homes would need reinforced perimeters. European culture itself would have grown around the presence of cave lions the way some parts of the world evolved around tigers or crocodiles. Only harder, because cave lions were bigger, faster, and built for colder climates. Battles, migrations, borders, empires. All of that would have been influenced by where the lions ruled. Some areas that became powerful kingdoms might have remained empty just because no one could push through that territory safely. Exploration timelines would shift. Trade routes would be different. Entire cities might not exist where they are today. And humans would be shaped by that pressure. We might have developed stronger group-based travel traditions far earlier. Weapon technology in Europe might have advanced faster, specifically for anti-predator defense. Early architecture might have focused more on height, walls, and visibility than comfort. Even folklore, religion, and art would reflect a constant living presence of a massive predator instead of just memories carved in stone. The cave lion wouldn't just be an ancient symbol. It would be a living one, a real one, a creature children are warned about, not just read stories about. A being that commands respect the way dragons do in myths, except this one would be real, breathing, stalking, and yet humans would still be here. That part wouldn't change. Humans always find a way. But the relationship between humans and nature would look very different. We might be less careless, more alert, less disconnected from the idea that we are still animals living in a world controlled by other animals too. The illusion that we own the planet might not exist in the same way. And the most interesting part? If cave lions had survived, you might not see them that often. Not because they wouldn't exist, but because they'd be too smart to be seen, like they always were. You'd know they're out there. You'd see signs, tracks, missing animals, stories, warnings, but actual sightings would be rare. That sense of something unseen, unaccounted for, would be part of everyday life. In a strange way, the world might feel more ancient than modern, more real, more tense, more alive. But they didn't survive. The last of them disappeared, and with them went Europe's most terrifying ruler. Humans filled the empty spaces, built over old hunting grounds, slept inside caves that once belonged to death, and slowly forgot what it meant to not be on top of the food chain. Until now, you can walk through European forests thinking you're safe. You can travel through mountains without scanning every shadow. You can camp in valleys that once echoed with low, rumbling roars.